Morning, everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to do some measurement stuff I've been wondering, and then we're going to talk about value in a way. I think there's maybe two or three, probably three, like, bullet points I want to talk about. This is not convocation specific. Um, Even the measurements I'm doing now are not necessarily convocation specific, but I do want to, it's something interesting I've been thinking about lately, especially with some of the leaderships that are out there. So I actually just want to do some measurements because I'm not sure. So this is deadline and virus, and I wanted to see. So I know that a large base, like a juggernaut, can't get to here in a double move if they pick this up. And so I'm just wondering. This is actually not really that relevant, I guess, but I'm wondering if they can get to the other deadline. So that's just an easy one I want to check. Oh, I have this stupid thing on. Okay, can you get there? This is good to know for any like Hulk or anything like that. Okay, easily. Nice. So that's good for two reasons. One, well, you gotta also look where you can get to, because if you're sliding, you're not gonna get. How does the line not show up? You're not gonna get to where they are. So, because they're probably gonna pick it up like here. I was thinking if they get both of them, could you walk, slide, hit, as opposed to standing in front of them and doing it? So, okay, that's good to know. I don't know actually how relevant that is to anything. I was actually, because it was a game I had jugs, if he was going to pick up this, could he walk to the detonates on the side? Which, I guess in detonate, like obviously getting a big hit is way better, but it is kind of an interesting thing to think about where like attacking somebody who picked up something next to detonate, it's almost like, it's not better, it's always better to attack, but you could just double walk to like here and ping them, and like that's value in and of itself, right? It's an auto damage. I mean, they can drop the thing, which they won't. Now they might just because you have power on you don't have any power on yourself, so that's something to be wary of. If they have last activation, they could very really, if you just double walk and ping them, just drop it and say, all right, well, I don't care. They're not going to do that. The other thing I wanted to measure was, and we'll get to the value part. This is just a quick. So one thing I know is, a long mover doesn't get to the point. We all know that. That's not crazy. What I am wondering though is if you were to put like Zemo right here and just move him up, right? Because what there is, and I actually think it works. So I think this is like kind of an important measurement. I was thinking about this the other day because I played Deadline yesterday. Is if somebody like Shang picks up, if you want to do both, be on the point and pick this up, you have to be, it's hard to do the measurement to be honest with you, but you have to be more up, right? Like you almost have to be between them to do it, right? Like you almost have to be here. And so I know it's not even close. Okay, cool. Because like if you're all the way back here, if you're out of his range, okay, this is actually a very important measurement. I think this is more important than it kind of might make you believe, but if you want to be out of Zemo, well, you're not even out of Zemo's range. Damn. Okay, yeah, you're legitimately like screwed doing it. Okay. What about a bigger base? This is really fascinating to me because it does matter for Zemo. I don't even think he can do it. Well, I guess I should measure this way because then I can actually like. Okay. So that kind of gets you there. You probably could be a little farther back. All right, that's really, really good to know. So essentially what I was measuring was, obviously we know that he can't get to the point in one move. But, if somebody was straight off the back of this, and I'll just set it up real quickly, right? He also can't get to them, right? It makes sense because the range 2 is essentially the same distance as the max of both of them contesting. So he's just short, right? Just because he's just short of contesting that. But what is like relevant is to get any like where to get both of them, right? If you want to pick this up and get the point, you have to be up further because of the triangle to get both one, right? So you can get Zemo. So that actually kind of makes Zemo even, it has to be Zemo. It can't be like Shang. Better on this secure. He's already pretty good because he can get around it very quickly. He has charge. He's a Zemo. He's amazing. Blah, blah, blah. But it makes it almost a little bit even more interesting because he can, if you want, if it's squishy enough, you can just charge and get a double tap. Now, if you do 2 damage on the first attack, you could follow up with a spender so you can get on the point. You could follow up with a reroll all if you want. If you get 3 power, then you could spender so you can get to here and then ping them. You could make the claim of I'm just going to walk, charge there and not risk it. But I guess if you think about it math-wise, what's the risk, right? So if you charge and don't get 2 damage, right? You can just walk here and say, all right, it's the same as if I walked and charged on the point. It's just in a different order. But now you know if you got the damage or not. Yeah, that makes sense. There's no reason to walk charge if you set it up this way, because if you miss the first attack, you can just make the decision to walk here. If you do only 1 damage, then you can make the choice, I'm going to walk ping, because that's about as good as making a second attack and you can test it. And if you get 2 damage, you can just spender and get here and accept you won't get the ping. If you get 3 damage, you can spender, get here and get the ping. Yeah, so there's like 0 reason to not charge. But that's a good thing to note. I don't think a lot of people, you don't think about that. When you play it, I think when you play the scenario, you realize, oh shit, I have to be a little bit farther up. And all those things that are just out of range aren't out of range anymore. So, okay. +1 for Zemo on deadline. Great. And the jug stuff. Okay. So what I want to talk about is value. And so I think there's 3 places that aren't, so pregame, right? Pregame places that, okay, I guess it's kind of like 2 separate sections. I think there's getting value in like deployment and in squad building / threat selection. And I think there's value assessment when looking at like leaderships and stuff like that. So do I have, okay. I don't know which one I should have up, if I should have this or not. Let's start with some value propositions. I think leaderships is a big one. So can we go to like leaders? That's a filter here, right? Show leaders only. See that. So I think there's multiple. I kind of hate the word value sometimes, but that's because some TCG stuff uses value a lot. But maybe it's opportunity cost is a better way to think about it. But if you think about a leader and a leadership, right? I think there's a couple levels of opportunity costs when picking leaders, right? So you can look at the leadership. So basically, unless you're going unaffiliated, you're going to have a leadership, right? It's a really crux of the game, having leaderships most of the time. And so you have to think, what do those leaderships do? Okay, so we can think of it as, I wish I had made a PowerPoint, but you know me, I don't do that shit. All right, we have the leadership itself, right? And I think one thing I want you to think about is, a leadership can be good. Okay, how can I say it? Almost every leadership is positive, right? In 90, unless it's like some real shitty leadership or has some weird drawback, it's positive, right? So what I mean by that is, let's take the most basic leadership. Pay for a reroll, right? Black Panther type, Invincible Iron Man. It is positive, right? There's no, I mean, yes, if you pay the power and don't get the roll, it sucks, it wastes power, but I guess technically that one has a downside. Let's use a simpler example. A reroll. Let's just say there was a leadership that just was like, you get to reroll 1 attack die, Cable's leadership, right? You reroll 1 attack die, ignore cover, right? It's all positive. No matter who's attacking, it is a positive leadership. And that is not the context I think you should look at a leadership per se. They should be positive. That's the whole point of having leadership. If you didn't have a positive leadership or that does something, why would you take the leadership? And I understand the downside and the trade-offs might not be worth it, but those are just bad leaderships then. And then you have to think of leaderships compared to other leaderships, right? It's the incremental value you get from having that leadership over another one, right? So I see too many people that go like, oh yeah, X leadership is good. It's good on this. Well, first off, saying it's good on a model is kind of weird. Like, unless it has some abstract like benefit. Like a good example would be Steve 3, right? Steve 3 really does help turn on some triggers that are hard, to the point that like it's really good on them. And it does like crank them higher than somebody who has either a shitty trigger or like no trigger. But people are sometimes like, man, this leadership really turns this model up to 11 because it's a reroll. And I'm like, all right, everybody's good with a reroll. I know there's some, if you have unlocked skulls and stuff, it starts to scale differently. But this idea that like, I don't know, a shitbag getting one reroll on a leadership attack and some decent model getting a leadership is not that much different. There is difference, there's nuance, but like I don't know. It's like saying it's the whole everyone's good with a hammer thing, right? Yeah, everyone loves an extra attack die. Like you're not special for liking that. Anyway, I digress. Leadership value. So value of what you can take in other leadership abilities. Now it's not that simple, right? It's not just a list of 10 leaderships and you get to pick one of them and be like, then it would be easy, right? If every leadership was off a model and you just got to pick one off the shelf, it would be much easier to pick the really broken ones and, the Steve 1 ones or something. And half these reroll leaderships would probably never make it to the table because I don't know if they're good enough on their own. There probably are some compared to some of the power leaderships and like bump and stuff like that. So then what's the next value prop? Is it a card or not, right? So there's not many of them. Everyone that's a card leadership, you have to ask yourself, this is also a tactics card. I get the leadership on there. It's something else, and it's a tactics card. There's a tactics card I could get instead of that might have a lot of value. Think of any basic tactics card, right? Then you'll say, and even the convocation one isn't a tactics card, but it counts as 1 year 10, which is whatever. It's not that big a deal. And then I think the most important one, besides what the leadership is, you can say, okay, there's affiliation. What affiliate models do you want? What, it kind of branches into everything. But I do think if you kind of maybe exile a little bit of like the affiliated tactics card, the affiliated list, look at what the model is, right? Is the model worth taking? How does that model affect your roster? I think here's a good example, right? I think name or leadership is kind of an interesting invaders, right? I didn't talk about it because I never released that video, actually. You get this leadership that's a card. So that's value, opportunity cost you have to look at. And you have to say, okay, the leadership's pretty good. A reroll in defense and unlock skulls has definitely some opportunity for various models. But it is a card, and you say the opportunity cost. But then, like, one thing I kind of go back and say, well, it's attached to a very strong model, right? He is actively a really good model. He splashed a lot on his own without the leadership. So you get the benefit of having a very strong model that has a decently good leadership. I don't value his leadership as highly as maybe some people, but you know me. I'm very picky about leaderships. Whereas I think comparing him to like Dracula might be a good example, right? I think Dracula and Namor are both very strong models. Differently, Namor's probably more like can be used anywhere. They both take a card. I think Namor leadership is way better than Dracula's. Dracula's is a lot more specific to him, but like the reroll defense and the unlock skulls, there's so many models I can use that. And then really the only downside is, okay, if you compare them, they're both 5 threat leaders. They're both good models, but Namor's pretty much good in any scenario crisis, and I think like you don't really want to be stuck with Dracula on D's per se. And then you say, okay, they both take a card. Namor's leadership's better. Namor has to be locked behind shield, but you could take like Superior Spider-Man, like Hawkeye, and maybe Agent Venom and run like this very tight core where, Dracula gets open leadership, but at the same time, like, okay, are you, what are you taking that is so like crazy? Like you're already going to take like Zemo and Invaders. So you're really like the other 2 slots, like you get to take, I don't know, some good 3 that's slightly better than Superior Spider-Man or something. Is that even his name? Superior? Anyway, Spectacular Spider-Man. And maybe somebody who's a little better than Hawkeye. But then you also get shield cards on the other side. But then, I don't know. It kind of comes down to, like, you can almost, like, do that value math in your head and be like, oh, man, like, Invaders as a style of, like, strong 5-threat leader with a card is probably just better. Now, obviously, if you want to play Drac, you play Drac. But I think, there's a lot of opportunity cost in taking Namor, and that's a card slot. The leadership is powerful, but not the most powerful, but he's a very good model. So there's like, oh, that's really cool. I can see why that's good. But you have to weigh all those options. Then you go to somebody like Steve 1. I'm a Steve 1 hater. I know his leadership's good. I think he has one of the best leaderships, like, probably. But I do think that he himself is pretty garbage. Um, and I think that's what keeps him, I'll say, in check. I don't know, you can say in check. I think his leadership kind of warps some things. It's kind of like lame in its own way. But him being, in my eyes, as bad as he is, a model you would never play outside of his leadership, like ever, is what you have to value that. You can look at Steve's leadership and go, wow, I get all these charges, right? And then you can also say to yourself, well, I'm paying 4 threat to make other people better. It's almost like playing a support model, right? Where you're like, oh, I can take Clea to give dice or to teleport somebody, but I could just take a good model instead of Clea and just get value that way, right? So this is the whole shitbag sidekick debate where if you have too many of those models, you start to not actually have people that benefit, right? If you take Steve one with Wong and Mordo because you want to heal and give people power and dice buff them for one, and then you're like, oh shit, I just spent 9 threat and I have like 1 model, 2 models left to actually do stuff, it starts to feel bad. So I don't know. I think there's this people, like, you really just got to think about everything. Now, if you just love an affiliate, now, really, to be completely honest, there's not a lot of opportunity to really value this out because if you like an affiliation, you're probably only going to get to choose between 2 or 3 leaders if you're lucky. And so, like, if you really love, I mean, Avengers and X-Men are a terrible example of the counter, but like if you really love, I don't know, Jesus, I don't know, Wakanda has several leaders for some reason. What's an affiliation that I'm trying to think of? I don't know why I can't think of this off the top of my head. Spider Foes have 2 leaders, but like, yeah, if you really love Spider Foes, you're basically choosing between 2 leaders, and you have. I mean, maybe that's the good example too. Who's a shitty one? I don't know. I guess a lot of people have more than 1 leader now that it actually becomes like a thought process. Yeah, I guess maybe my example of there's not many of them. I guess A-Force only has 1, but if you really love A-Force, you're gonna play She-Hulk, right? If you love Unigard, you're gonna play that. Web Warriors, I think that becomes very obvious right now that you just play Miles. But then you have, but I think this is maybe more relevant in like X-Men, for example, where you have 3 leaderships that are all usable and they all have models underneath them that like you really got to weigh that. Well, they don't have cards involved, but you got to weigh like the model itself. Like Professor X is not considered a very good model, but he might have the best leadership in the X-Men. So, how do you leverage that? How do you decide if that's good or not? Now, if you're looking for more broadly, like, what am I going to play outside of, I don't care what affiliation I play, I just want a good leader, then I think the value train of thinking through the whole thing really starts to become interesting. I guess what I'm trying to say is I see too many people focus on the leadership itself, like the text bubble, and then being like, this is a good leadership. And what I want to say is you cannot just look at the leadership. Like, I think here's the thing. It's the hammer thing. All leadership should be positive in some capacity or have positive uses. That's not the value you're basing it off of. You're basing it off of the value of the leadership compared to other leaderships you could have. Right? It's not, I'm picking up $1 off the street and being like, that's a great value. It's like, there's $1 and a $5 bill, and I can only pick up 1. And then I'm really excited about the $1 bill because I'm not thinking about the $5 bill. Right? That's kind of like the best example there. So I think there's value to be had there. All right. That's in choosing leadership. So let's think about the next level. It's choosing squads. I think if I want to comment on one specific thing here, it would be, this is probably not the best place to do it. Rosters. So I have my opponent's roster from yesterday. I'll use his example because we talked about it after the game. He picked 16 threat and he chose Strange, Namor, Wong, and Shang-Chi, which is a good squad. And it was like deadline scientific samples. And after the game, he said he had a choice between 16 or 17 threat. Right? So in my game, my team, it was like Jugs, Magic, Taskmaster, Wong, Zemo. And so that's my 16. You can look at our 16s next to each other. And he didn't know I was going to take that exact 16. So it's hard to I mean, it's probably not like something you would think of me taking, but that's not the point. So you look at our 16 and you say, well, what would it have been like if we went to 17, right? And let's just say that the idea of the team, like you're not going to rearrange everything. You're not going to all of a sudden take Daredevil, though I guess you could think about that. But in his mind, he's like, oh, 17 gets me Hawkeye over Wong. And we'll say in my example, I really just get, it's either Shang over Zemo or I get Voodoo over Taskmaster, right? And so you can sit there and say, well, not which one's better per se, but yeah, who gets more value from the upgrade? Because it's not always equal, right? Zemo, I'll give you, here's a great example. Zemo going to Shang is, of course, a really, it's saying Shang's a more threat. He's better. But it's not as big as, like, some models going to another model. Like, I don't know what the biggest jump in the game is, what people would consider the biggest jump. I think 2 to 3 is pretty big. Like, Wong becoming a more relevant model, I think has a lot of value in it versus like Zemo becoming Shang. Now, obviously, Taskmaster going to Voodoo has a lot of relevance too, so you never know. But I think that when you're picking threat value, it really is important to look at what the opponent can do and say things like, well, they could go 4 wide. Oh, he went 16, so he's like, he could go. He had to choose, so I had no point. But when you're thinking about your squad, thinking about what the enemy can do and saying, wow, he really could go 3 wide at 16 with Hulk, Doctor Strange, Namor. And then you think to yourself, well, can I handle that? If we went to 17, he can't go 3 wide at 17. Like if I was picking the threat value, maybe I was scared. Maybe it's Fisk, for example. Fisk is maybe a better example. Let's say we were playing Fisk and I got to choose. He didn't have Fisk, but. And so I could look at his team and go, well, if he wants to play Strange, he can't play Hulk and Namor together because it's only if we go 17. And so what does he play? Well, assuming he wants Strange and he wants Hulk, he basically has to take Wong, Shang, or 2 3s. And maybe you say, well, 3s are probably better because Wong sucks on Fisk, or maybe he isn't good on Fisk. You don't want him as much on Fisk, and so then he's not going to play Shang. And then you can kind of go down this rabbit hole of like, oh, if I pick 17, he gets to play Strange Hulk. Or that is, if he plays 16, he can go 3 wide. I don't want to go 3 wide. I'll pick 17, so he has to go 4 wide. And if he goes 4 wide with Hulk and he wants to take Shang, he has to take Wong with that. So it kind of like spirals into this decision tree of what can they do at different threats. And so if I'm only scared of him going 3 wide at 17 and he can't, then maybe I just choose 17. But I think there's a little bit of incremental value there. You can get where you're not going to be able to always predict their squad, and it's not really to like super counter them. I don't think you like are going to win the game because you pick the right threat level, and you never know what they're going to do. So for example, in mine, you could say, oh, if we went to 17, he gets to upgrade Taskmaster to Voodoo, right? And then you get to upgrade Hawkeye to Wong to Hawkeye, and you could kind of run the game in your head with those changes. But 1, it's going to change how they play. But 2, it could just change everything, right? Oh, at 17, if I wanted to run 4 wide 16, I'd have to take like Voodoo Wong or Magic Taskmaster if I wanted Juggernaut in there too, right? If I wanted Jug. So it would be these 2 and then like 2 3s. Or it would be, Voodoo Wong. And I'm like, oh, I don't want Wong 4 wide. I don't like that. He did it. And then I say, well, at 17, you could say, well, Wong becomes Magic. And then I kind of have the same thought process there. Where like, oh, I could now, maybe I didn't want to go 4 wide. But if we go 17, now I'm okay going this. Or, I don't know. It can just change like multiple things. You can't always look at it in a vacuum of like, they would get 1 extra more with what I took. It could open up different opportunities. But I do think it is good to think about that to get small instances of value or, little percentages here. I think the last 2 that are like pre-going, like turn 0 stuff. So everything we've talked about, like the squad building is just opportunity cost, but then we're really like picking your leader is like very high level opportunity cost. What do you want to do? Looking at value across everything, what cards you get, blah, blah, blah. Same with tactics cards. A lot of tactics cards are good. You got to look at what you get if the tactics card was something else. You can't look at just like, this card is good. Is this card better than this card? Because I could take that card, right? That's the big way. There's a lot of cards that you're like, man, this is a pretty cool card. And then like, By the time you're putting it in your 5 or even your 10, you're like, man, it's just never going to win out over this card. And you realize that you're never going to take it. Stuff like that. So 2 places to really, I think, find value in turn 0, aside from what we just said, picking squad. Your squad is picked. I think side choice is really big. So if you just take this map, for example, and let's just say we're playing, let's say it wasn't virus. Let's say it was like hammers, right? If it was hammers, it would be like one on here, and then the hammer would be here, right? If you can kind of tell where things would be on the map, right, and it was hammers, like, to me, this side, if you don't have priority, is, I think, better. Just straight off the bat. And so some things you might look for, if you could tell that the scenarios were going to be there. So one thing to note is, like, I think Leaf taught me this. If you ever want to know where the center line is, it's like legitly between the 12 and 13. So like if you draw a line between like that and this, you can see where the center line is, so you can kind of see where the objectives are going to be. So something I would notice would be this truck would be on the opposite side. So 1, he has to climb over to get here, but 2, if he takes this one first, it's a lot easier for me to take something safely here because I'll be behind the size 3. Something to note. Maybe messes with him and helps you, or you at least get cover. I think it happens like with cover where like this car might be like here, and you might say, I want to be on this side so I can get cover, though I guess you could always stand on it, so it's not always like a perfect way to think about it. But also, like, if it's something with like hammers and you think they might take like a rhino or somebody that can pick up the hammer straight off the bat, like here, you know, you can tell that this blocks this one. So like if you really wanted to take like a rhino and get a big base on the hammer that's in your back point, you might want to pick this side to mess with them because they can't do it. So things like that. Like I think you can get little value on deployment by looking at the map and being like, where things are, where do I think things are going to be turn 1? You know, again, unless it's like a very obvious like fucking their safe grab or something, I just think it's good to know. It's good to kind of get that little bit. The other one, I've talked about this a lot before, so I'm not going to go too deep, but it's just like understanding, this is probably not the best example just given the map layout, but this is like kind of the whole putting a model so that it has multiple options. Like let's just say you put Shang here. And let's just say there's no way for Shang to charge turn 1, right? You don't have Wong. And this is hammers, right? There's probably something to be said of like if you put Shang here, he can either double walk to this one if they don't take it, or he can walk kick them. If you put Shang here, you might want to say, I want to be close enough that I can walk and grab this. And maybe, I don't know. This is not the great example. The thing is, there's a lot of deployment where there's like a gray area of like where a model can go and what it can threaten, and trying your best to leave yourself options. So you could say, I want to put Juggernaut here, I don't know, because I want to be able to smash into this. I see a good example. I don't even know. Maybe it's like back when you're playing Bs, right? Like there's a B map where like maybe a long mover here is the best example. Like he can get to either of these, right? And so the fact that Zemo can get to either one gives you the value of he should probably be in the middle because in this one I already told you about how he can charge if they try to pick up both. So maybe you put him on one side, but let's just say that that's not the case. Let's say it was hammers when they were both on this. You might put him in the middle because if he's going to walk, charge with his card or just even double walk, he can get to both sides from here. So why put him here? If he's here, he has to walk charge to get this point anyway. If he's here, he has to walk charge to get here. Like you don't gain a lot by being here versus here. If anything, you gain nothing and you get to threaten charging either side. That's kind of like the thought. Like it's a very basic one, but it's a good one. Same with like a Bill. Bill can get from here and pick up either side. So if you put him in the middle and you don't have priority, and you really want to pick up with a Bill, you just sit here and take the one they don't take. So definitely think about like how you think the first turn's going to go. can you optimize where your models are to do multiple things and not like super telegraph everything. That's why something like a name or safe grab without priority, I think there's definitely room, if you think about it, to say, I have priority, he's going to safe grab, you know, or when you're against a name or safe. I think this is maybe when you're against it, maybe it's a little more important. If they put their name or here to safe grab this virus, right? And you're like, man, they're going to safe grab this virus. I'm just going to put my, I don't know, my Shang-Chi right here to grab this one. And then I'm going to try to punish, I don't know, something over here. If you don't put enough stuff over here, like you just think you're going to grab it with something shitty. Shang's not an example, but I don't take shitty models that often. They might just say, and or the better yet, you don't put something over here to grab this one. Like the only thing that could grab this was like your 2-threat. You really load up on this side. But your team isn't like that good at punishing. They might just say, fuck this. I'm going to go grab this one with some tanky model. And you don't have anything that can get the Namor one that's good. And then Namor's going to get both of them, right? So, like, you kind of have to respect. I think the word is respect. You have to respect what your enemy can do and make them do stuff, right? If you just... okay, I'll give you one more example because I'm here. From a recent game I played. I think it's the one versus Zach. There was a game where, like, my Shang was over here and he had, like, he had, like, Toad, his Shang, and Spectacular Spider-Man. And I still walked my Shang up here. And I put him, like, within 2 of Toad. Toad wasn't on the point. Shang was on the point. So if I don't put him there and I just move him towards the fight instantly, he can now say, well, Spectacular Spider-Man doesn't need to go here. I'm going to get that point. I'm going to start moving him this way, right? But I put my Shang here. So now if he wants to get this point, he has to move Spectacular there. And now he has 3 models here. Now they're all very fast, so it's not that oppressive. But he has 3 models here. And he has to, like, think about his next turn. Also, if I was just to walk away, Toad can basically just walk here. And then Shang can leave and start playing the game. And now he has a Hammer and Toad sitting on one side of the board that I have no one to interact with. Putting my Shang here, where he was in 2 of Toad. So now, I think I had priority, but I was doing something else. I think I was killing Gwen. But it kind of gives the thing now of, okay, Toad is next to Shang. He has no one to help him. If I hit him, I can then charge him and follow up. Like, he now has to go with Toad and run him the fuck away, right? So now Toad doesn't get to sit here for free because my Shang is here and didn't start walking in the middle of the board. So now he has to activate Toad or I'm going to go after him, and I have a decent shot to kill him because he can't slippery because I can punch him because I'm within 2 and then charge to wherever he's slippery to and punch him again. And then if I do kill Toad and get his hammer, you know, Spectacular and rival Shang is not easy to get the hammer back, but it's also pulling 3 of his activations to deal with my Shang, who has a hammer, but, like, he's just getting the hammer back that he had to start where I had one over here. So it's like, it's kind of like diving somebody's F with, like, Proxima. I think Curtis did this in his game. You dive somebody's back F, and, like, the enemy has to put all this attacks and stuff to kill them, where if they don't, you're way ahead. And if they do, they just get back the extract they should have got to begin with. And so it's like parity. So if it works and you go up big, like Curtis did turn 1, it's like 6-2, even they still have to get the extract back. But even if they do, now you're at a state that if we're in like even land where you have 2 and I have 2 and I'm sitting on my back infinity, I'm already up 4 points and I'm going to win out. The pressure's all on you. And you've already had to exert a lot of pressure to take back what was yours to begin with. That's why this idea of, like, giving people their, like, going even turn 1 safely versus taking risks to maybe go up a little bit has value. That if it works, they have to do extra work to get back to even state. And then when it's at even state, you're ahead. And they have to be they have to put the pressure on. Like, I think that has value. I think that, I think there are some games that people go very even early and they go even, and then something happens, whether it's a good roll, bad roll, something like breaks the game to be like 16-14, right? And it's too late to recover. You hear the story about, man, turn 4, we were 12, we were 4-4, 8-8, 12-12, and then They two-tapped one of my guys, got my hammer, and got away and won 16-14, something like that, right? And you have to ask yourself, okay, were you very, like, if you were both very cagey and tie, somebody breaks the game, you know, that's kind of, you're putting, you don't give yourself time to recover. If you do something very aggressive turn one, or not super aggressive, but aggressive enough to, like, try to get the game in your favor, when they flip it back, or if something happens, like they, you know, you go down 9-7 turn two, you know you're down and you have time to make the moves to win later, right? Like you have, like, it's kind of like people who go up like 6-2 to round one sometimes lose because they play all their cards to go, like X-Men problem. They play all their cards to go up 6-2 and the enemy is like, well, I just got to fucking go. Like, I just got to go. There's no, I can't sit here. I only have one avenue to win. And then they go and they get it done because, you know, they're not playing shitbags or something. And then, you know, sometimes the X-Men players are like Pikachu face, like, how did this happen? I was so far up. And I think that, you know, you almost lose more games where you're super far up early because you take the, you're like, I'm so far up, I'm just going to run. And you realize that you start running away and the enemy come get you. And when they get you, you can't recover anymore because, like, you're in your back D and they have somebody here with an extract, there's somebody here, and they're just going to outscore you, or like you're way off the intrusions or something. There's millions of examples out there, but what was I even saying? What was the whole point of what I was talking about? I don't know. Value plays, doing things to make your opponents, I don't know, look for opportunities. People will say, and I've said it a million times, I like to play more crazy games because I think chaos breeds more room for opportunity. It's not hard to sit on your side of the board with your two extracts and hope it goes your way on turn 4. But if you make it crazy, you give the opportunity for way more mistakes on your opponent's side because there's way more going on with, like, activation order and rolls. But it also allows you the chance to come back if something goes wrong. If it goes wrong and you lose instantly, what's the point? If it goes wrong turn 2 and you have time to, like, recover from it with good rolls or something, or good plans, and you know it's bad, it's a lot better. Anyway, I don't even know what I'm going to call this video. Value in something else. But anyway, thanks for listening.